Hello, everyone. The title of this research is Luis Estévez, Fashion, Elegance, and Exoticization. The research resulted in an exhibition in the Donna Gallery within the Donna Ray Danielson Conservation Laboratory at the Textiles and Clothing Museum at Iowa State. The exhibition is viewable from the hallway behind the lab. On the left is one of the exhibition's posters. A total of 12 objects are featured in the research and exhibition, including 6 garments, 3 press photographs, 2 clothing patterns, and a magazine. My name is Joshua D. Simon, and I completed the research and curated the exhibition as part of my role as an Agatha Hoopenbecker Burnett Endowed Graduate Research and Teaching Assistant, as well as a Master of Science student at Iowa State. Associated with contemporaries like Oscar de la Renta, Bill Blass, and Rudy Gernreich, and a founding member of the Council of Fashion Designers of America, Luis Estévez's place among the fashion design greats is seemingly self-explanatory. However, this is not the case. Virtually absent from many popular fashion history textbooks and prominent museum collections, scholarship centering Estévez is extremely minimal. The purpose of this research is to provide an overview of key themes within Luis Estévez's career in order to address the gap of minimal scholarship that centers him, as well as to disrupt the dominant, white, heterosexual, or queer without public acknowledgement narrative in fashion history. Luis Estévez de Galvez was born circa 1929 in Havana, Cuba. Born into an economically well-off family in the Cuban sugar industry, he went to an elementary school in England and then attended Sanford Prep in Wilmington, Delaware. Estévez continued his education by attending architectural school in Havana for a period. He worked as a window merchandiser at Lord & Taylor during summer break from school, in which he was noticed for his skill by store leadership. Estévez then dropped out of architectural school, enrolling at the Trey Pagan School of Fashion, and eventually designed for Lord & Taylor. He wanted to continue developing his skills, so he went to Paris to study couture at Jean Patou. He married Betty Du Menzies, a childhood acquaintance, in the mid to late 1950s. Estévez and Betty lived together in Paris in the early years of their marriage, but when Estévez returned to the United States, Betty decided to stay, with the two living apart but remaining married for many years, meeting up a few times a year. Estévez had an affair which resulted in his son Edward being born circa 1962. After some time in New York, he moved to Los Angeles in the mid-1960s. Throughout the years, he was part of several companies, including Granell Estévez, Ava Gabor International, and Viva Luis Boutiques. He eventually retired and passed away in late 2014 at the age of 85. Simplicity, clean lines, and uncluttered design were hallmarks of Luis Estévez's work. Discussion of this was seen across several publications. A 1956 New York Times article stated that he keeps his lines clear and uncluttered, and that his clothes are simple yet sophisticated. Another example of the importance of these design characteristics in Estévez's work came from a 1962 article in which he discussed wedding dresses. A dress should be as simple, uncomplicated, and as unmarred by the torturing of fabric as a girl should be when she is getting married. Simple, clean lines can be seen in the black cocktail dress from the exhibition. These design features may have stemmed from the preferences or influence of his wife, Betty. Estévez stated that she likes her dresses to be of simple, sharp lines, uncluttered with details, and in good taste for every possible occasion. The red evening ensemble featured in the magazine advertisement on display also features minimal, uncluttered adornment and sharp lines. Of note is that a model who appears to be a person of color is utilized in 1976 without underlying exoticization. Another example discussed Betty as a source of inspiration for Estévez, stating, "She likes her clothes to be simple, with lines sharply defined and totally uncluttered." Here, I have included an example displaying the simplicity in Estévez's design work. At the center is Dina Merrill wearing an Estévez evening gown. Its inspiration, the painting Madame X, is seen on the left. Meanwhile, an evening bodice designed by Estévez in the collection of the Met that draws similarities is seen on the right. It was posited that Estévez was known for his sexy but ladylike afternoon and evening clothes. This was accompanied by an image seen here of a backless evening dress, a common design feature Estévez employed. This idea of sensuality in his designs is supported by a 1964 article, which stated that Estévez was known for siren dressing. Another example of this was seen in a 1958 article, which stated that Estévez was honored for his svelte, femme fatale creations. This white circa 1975 evening gown featured in the exhibition showcases this sensuality, with a plunging neckline and gathers that draw attention to the bust. Further, a 1970 Women's Wear Daily article proclaimed, "Luis Estévez is still a master at the theatrical, dramatic presentations." Similarly to the evening gown in the exhibition, the gown in this press photograph features a dramatic plunging neckline, with the lighting and pose creating a theatric composition. Estévez employed this sensuality when designing clothing patterns as well, evident in this evening gown pattern featured in the exhibition, with a sensual plunging neckline and dramatic billowing sleeves. The black and white polka dot coat dress in the exhibit leans more into the theatrical dramatic design characteristics, as it is a very eye-catching over-the-top garment. This dramatic and sensual language was also used in a 1976 article to discuss the types of women he enjoyed designing for. This discussion of women's bodies flowed into conversation surrounding his sexuality. Kern, the author of the article, stated, "Women have always been more important in his life than men," followed by a quotation from Estévez stating that he was attracted to both sexes. "It's a matter of chemistry." Estévez's openness about queerness and Kern's decision to include this discussion of queerness in the Women's Wear Daily piece are significant for analysis. Much activism, particularly in the late 1960s and early 1970s, contributed to fighting stigma and discrimination faced by queer people. However, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and other systems of marginalization were still faced by LGBTQ plus communities, leading some to hide or not speak openly about their queerness. For example, Rudy Gernreich, a contemporary of Estévez, once said that he believed it would be bad for his fashion business if it was known that he was gay. Despite this fear, Estévez talked openly about queerness, and Kern included the discussion in the 1976 piece. It could be posited that this candidness partially influenced museums' collecting practices. Museums incorporating social justice into their praxis is a fairly recent trend, which still faces extreme opposition. Historically, key stakeholders from privileged groups have held power within museums and have thus reproduced systems of domination, such as homophobia as well as white supremacy. When a majority of the collecting of objects of Estévez's heterosexual or heterosexual presenting contemporaries was occurring, the same did not transpire for pieces by Estévez. Therefore, it could be argued that Estévez's openness surrounding his sexuality partially vilified him. Museums' vested interest in upholding queer marginalization and white supremacy positioned Estévez, and therefore objects created by him, as the other in comparison to heterosexual or heterosexual presenting and white or white appearing contemporaries. Pieces by Estévez may have been seen as not worthy of collection and preservation by curators and collections managers due to othering stemming from Estévez's queerness. For Estévez's summer 1956 collection, it was stated that the Latin motif will predominate. Further, it was stated that Estévez comes by the Latin theme naturally. Estévez was born in Cuba of Spanish parents. Additionally, in discussing this summer collection, it was stated that it is in his evening designs, especially, that the Spanish influence is delineated, with some designs being referred to as the flamenco look. In November 1957, he showed spring and resort wear, with the dresses and costumes being named for popular Latin American songs, such as those seen here. It is unknown if the dress in this press photograph from the exhibit is one of the three that are named after his songs, but it is from late 1957 as well, so it demonstrates Estévez's aesthetic when this language was being used in the fashion media. It could be argued that such language was both used by the fashion media to exoticize him, as well as to discuss the influence of Estévez's ethnicity and background on his work, as he mentioned being Latin in several interviews. In 1976, Women's Wear Daily conducted and published an interview with Estévez regarding his design and business philosophies, in which he was quoted as saying, "What I am talking about here is my fashion and my theory. I know that it's not in with the very hip crowd of people," he says with Latin fire, "but I don't really give a damn." Critical race theory can prove useful in critically reading the edition of the phrase Latin fire by Kern, the author. It could be argued that the inclusion of Latin fire was an example of a minor, daily way deeply entrenched racism within US society manifests. Through the addition of the phrase, one interpretation could be that Estevez's pattern of speech was racialized. It suggested that Latina, Latino, or Latinx individuals speak in a way that is passionate, direct, and possibly off-putting to some. The Latin fire wording othered Estévez in that his Cuban heritage inextricably influenced his speech pattern in ways not seen within the portrayal of those from dominant backgrounds. For example, suggesting that a designer speaks with French passion or white flair largely does not occur. The social construct of Latinness was employed to reify Estévez's place as the other, upholding the centering of whiteness within the fashion industry and the exoticization of people of color. It is clear that Estévez encountered issues related to the business side of fashion, which may have been due in part to valuing leisure and personal life over work. He dealt with several bankruptcies and multiple changes of business throughout the years. It was posited that this was due in part to Estevez's prioritization of leisurely pursuits and personal life over work. In a 1985 Women's Wear Daily article, it was stated that this would-be fashion juggernaut from the West says his laid-back period in Los Angeles is over and that he's ready to make a blockbuster comeback in New York. Estevez's New York Times obituary stated, "He was a person who liked to play. That meant more to him than being famous. He basically liked to have a good time." Price point was also central to Estevez's work, and he felt high prices did not equate to style. For example, the displayed party apron pattern was originally introduced and included in cereal boxes, allowing consumers to create stylish accessories for minimal amounts of money. Further, in a 1976 interview, he stated, "I don't believe in expensive clothes, and I don't think that good taste has to be expensive." He went on to condemn clothing priced over $400 and said that his apparel sold from $100 to $400. This point was reiterated several years later, in which the retail prices of his clothing went up to $400, but he prefers to aim at a market between $150 and $250. Estevez explained, "I dine with the classes, but I also dress the masses." This was especially true of his work with former First Lady Betty Ford, who purchased items from his collections rather than buying high-end garments from French couturiers. Betty purchased the same ready-to-wear beige and white dress that is on display, which she wore for her first in-depth interview as First Lady, as pictured on the left. However, Estevez did do some custom work for Ford, such as the sketched evening dress on the left. Estévez kept this dress within his typical price range, pricing it at $250. It was clear that Estévez and Ford had a close relationship, evident in the letter he wrote her on the right, in which he concludes, "Looking forward to seeing you. Much love, Luis." Several of his contemporaries also appealed to multiple price points in what was considered by some as an American or democratic approach to fashion design. Of note, however, is that Estevez expanded the idea of who could be an American fashion designer, which included bisexual Cuban Americans, contrary to the mostly white and heterosexual appearing designers at that time. This idea of a democratic approach to create unique styles is evident in two looks on display in the exhibit. The yellow bifurcated evening jumpsuit, providing an alternative to skirted ensembles popular during the period, as well as the blue and white dress, which is convertible to two different hem lengths and styles. Luis Estévez was a prominent individual in the fashion industry for over 4 decades. His simple, sensual, dramatic aesthetic was widely disseminated, from clothing patterns that were free with the purchase of cereal to dressing the First Lady of the United States. As previously stated, Estevez was a contemporary of and closely associated with Oscar de la Renta, Bill Blass, and Rudy Gernreich, names commonly discussed in fashion history contexts. Estevez, however, is virtually always absent from such discussion in spite of significant contributions to the industry. Additionally, representation in museum collections and fashion history conversations that accurately reflect what occurred in the industry is imperative, and it is vital for people of color, queer individuals, and others from marginalized backgrounds to be centered so that the field can move forward towards being more socially just. To conclude, I want to share a quote from an article about Narcisco Rodriguez, a contemporary Cuban American designer. The author of the article and Rodriguez both identify as gay Latinos and first-generation Americans. And the author went on to discuss, quote, "Why does representation like this matter? Because there are children like me who, when visiting museums, see the work from creators who do not look like them. Rodriguez's work, which has been shown in museums, inspires people like me to feel confident in their dreams," end quote. Here we see two examples of Rodriguez's work in the collection of the Iowa State Textiles and Clothing Museum from 2005 and 2008, respectively. This dialogue regarding representation can also be applied to other underrepresented individuals, such as Estevez. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.